Trump no longer seems to believe in a quick defeat of Ukraine.
Hello, I'm the boss.
Meanwhile, the Russians are losing their minds and are now attacking civilian vessels. In today's episode, new signals from Trump's team, a two-stage ceasefire, cautious contacts between Europe and the Kremlin, and a sharp warning from Zelenskyy to Ukrainians. Australia is allocating funds to Ukraine for military equipment, and in Kyiv, the topic of transportation has flared up again. Klitschko has rejected yet another petition against the increase in fare prices. The main news in a moment. Let's start with diplomacy, because today there is a lot of movement there, and it seems the direction is no longer the one Moscow was counting on. After the J7 summit, informal contacts with Russia have resumed.
During his Sunday telephone conversation with Russian President Putin, he shared his detailed information with him. President Putin, I had a very successful conversation with both Putin and President Zelenskyy. They need to talk, but they simply don't know how to do it. They just don't know how to have a conversation with each other.
At the same time, Ukraine and Donald Trump's team are maintaining daily communication regarding a possible ceasefire. A two-stage option is being discussed. The first stage is to limit hostilities within a 50 to 70 kilometer zone on both sides of the front line. The second stage is a broader agreement. In other words, this is a very complex process where each point could become a trap. But this does not mean a quick, peaceful settlement. However, a new opportunity for negotiations may arise. And this time, Ukraine is entering them from a stronger position. Macron stated that Trump was initially convinced that Ukraine would not withstand the war against Russia. That is why he previously sought a quick agreement.
Remember, January to February 2025, it feels like an eternity has passed. He thought that Ukraine would lose. Things were going badly in the Oval Office with President Zelenskyy. And then, less than a year ago, there was a high-level meeting between President Trump and President Putin in Anchorage, where they almost reached an agreement. We would give up Ukrainian territories that have not yet been conquered. Then representatives go to Washington in August saying, it's impossible, we're trying. A tremendous journey has been made. This journey was, above all, a victory for Ukrainians in their capability and trust.
But, according to the president of France, Trump changed his mind when he saw that the predictions of Ukraine's inevitable defeat did not come true. He saw that Ukrainians are holding on, fighting, adapting, and not falling apart at every Russian threat. And that is precisely why the Kremlin is now reacting so nervously to the J7 of European leaders and any conversations between Trump and Zelenskyy. And here we come directly to Zelenskyy's warning. The president stated that Putin is becoming weaker politically, physically, and on the battlefield, but that is exactly why he may intensify missile and drone strikes on Ukraine. Zelenskyy specifically urged Ukrainians to use shelters. According to him, partners already understand that Putin does not want to stop, and his talk about peace is a lie. The president also stated that Europe must get fully involved. Sanctions without exceptions, confiscation of Russian assets, and funding for Ukraine. And before we continue, subscribe to Focus, give us a like, and turn on notifications. Well, next up is the Black Sea. The Russians attacked civilian vessels in the waters. One sailor was killed, and there are injured. And for Russia, apparently, this is yet another method of blackmail. Moscow has long been trying to show if it doesn't control the sea, it will make it dangerous for everyone. Therefore, strikes on civilian vessels are also a sign of the Kremlin's frustration. Russia cannot completely blockade the Ukrainian sea, so it tries to make it as risky as possible. Australia will allocate an additional $100 million to Ukraine for the purchase of critically important military equipment. These financial resources will be processed through the PLR program, a mechanism by which allies purchase American weapons for Ukraine.
Australia remains steadfast in our support for Ukraine, and we are pleased to provide an additional $100 million in aid to Ukraine for vital military equipment. We will be making 2 additional contributions, totaling a total of $50 million, to the list of Ukraine's priority PLR needs, over 2026 to 2027. In partnership with NATO, Australia supports Ukraine in providing the critical military equipment and capabilities it needs to defend itself against Russia's unjustified and unprovoked invasion.
The new $100 million will be delivered in 2 tranches of $50 million each over the next 12 months. This is a continuation of Australia's December contribution. With this package, the total amount of support for Ukraine from Australia has already exceeded $1.8 billion. Of this, more than $1.6 billion is military aid. The Office of the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, had brief diplomatic contacts with the Kremlin to open channels of communication. Officially, this is not about substantive negotiations, but specifically about a communication channel. However, some European leaders did not like this initiative, and they can be understood. Several European leaders have warned that it is too early to start talks with Moscow if there are no real signs that the Kremlin is ready for peace. And now to Kyiv. Mayor Vitaly Klitschko has rejected a 3rd petition against raising public transport fares. This refers to petition number 14,223, which demanded not to raise the fare for municipal transport to 30 hryvnias. A single ticket in Kyiv is set to increase from 8 hryvnias starting July 15, 2026. And the new prices will apply to the metro, buses, trolleybuses, trams, and the funicular. The City Council explains this by the losses of transport enterprises. According to calculations by the relevant departments, these losses amount to almost 8.6 billion hryvnias per year. The fare of 8 hryvnias has not been revised since July 2018, and the petition gathered the required number of signatures. But the Kyiv city-state administration kept the decision to revise the fares in force. And this is already the 3rd petition with similar content that the city authorities have rejected. Very democratic. And that's all the main news for today. Subscribe to Focus, give us a like, let us know in the comments which news was the most important for you today, and turn on notifications to stay in the focus of events.